Namaste and good morning, India. Welcome to your daily update of top Indian headlines brought to you by OneRead.news. This is calm, clear, and factual news. Namaskar.
Hello everyone and welcome. So, if you've had a quick look at the news today, it probably seems like a total jumble of stuff, right? A bit chaotic, maybe a little confusing, but I promise you, it's not. Think of me as your slightly funny teacher for the day, the one who's going to help find all the hidden connections. Because underneath all that surface noise, these headlines are actually telling one big interconnected story about a nation that's figuring itself out day by day. And our job? Well, it's to uncover that story together.
All right, let's dive right in. Our first group of stories is all about, the rules of the game. Every country is kind of like a giant game, with rules that decide who has power, what happens when those rules are bent, and how everyone tries to stay safe. And right now, we're seeing some of those really fundamental rules being debated, completely rewritten, and sometimes even broken right out in the open. This is where you see what a society is really made of.
Okay, first up on the docket. Parliament is looking at a bill that has caused a political storm. The idea itself seems pretty straightforward. If a prime minister or a chief minister gets detained for more than 30 days on some pretty serious charges, they would automatically be out of a job. Now, on the surface, you think, hey, that sounds like a good accountability move, right? It's trying to make sure you don't have someone running a state or the whole country from a jail cell. But, and this is a big but, here's where it gets really sticky. Imagine you're watching a football match, and the referee can just kick a player off the field based on an accusation. Not a proven foul, just an accusation. Their big fear is that this law could be turned into a political weapon, a way for the party in power to knock out their rivals in other states just by using the legal system. So the real fight isn't about if we need a law like this, but about how to build in enough safeguards so that it can't be abused. It's that classic tug-of-war between holding power accountable and, preventing the abuse of power.
All right, let's look at another new rule being put on the books. This one is a nationwide ban on all online games that involve real money. Now, the government is trying to tackle some very real problems here. We're talking about serious addiction that can destroy families, financial scams that target vulnerable people, and even these platforms being used for stuff like money laundering. The bill passed pretty easily, which tells you there's a strong feeling that something had to be done. But the way they did it, that opens up a whole different can of worms. And here's that debate in a nutshell. Is this the government acting as a protector, stepping in to save its people from very real dangers? Or is this a nanny state that's going way too far? The analogy from the source is just perfect for this. Instead of maybe taxing sugar to make people eat less of it, the government just decided to ban the entire sweet shop. It really makes you wonder, where do you draw the line between protecting people and controlling them? And who gets to decide that for millions of us?
So we've talked about these big abstract rules being made in Parliament. But what happens when the rules about public safety crash right into the real world? Well, we see it in this really tough challenge that pretty much every public figure has to deal with, what you might call the politician's paradox. This is where all those fancy ideas about governments meet the messy, chaotic, and totally unpredictable reality of just being out there with the public.
And here it is laid out in a really shocking incident. The Chief Minister of Delhi, Rekha Gupta, was physically slapped during a public hearing at her own home, a place that's supposed to be open and accessible. The person who did it was apparently upset about a Supreme Court ruling on stray dogs. Now look at the official response. A police report was filed for attempt to murder. This one event just captures that paradox perfectly. Politicians are supposed to be available, right, to listen to people, but that very openness makes them a target. So how do you balance being one of the people with, just staying safe? There is no easy answer to that one.
And the threats aren't just physical anymore. Our last story in this section points to a totally modern kind of problem. Bomb threats were sent over email to about 50 schools all across Delhi. Now, thankfully, no bombs were found, but the result? Total city-wide panic. You had parents frantically rushing to schools, huge police deployments, the whole city was on edge. And here's the key thing to get, the asymmetry of it. One person with one single email can create mass chaos, bring a city to a halt, and spread so much fear. It's just a massive reminder that in our super connected world, the rules for safety are being rewritten by technology every single day.
Okay, so we've looked at the rules of the game. Now, let's switch gears a bit. Let's look at how the country's actually actively building its future. This isn't just about laws on paper anymore. This is about hard decisions. It's about spending real money, laying actual bricks, and investing in the big ideas that are going to shape what India looks like tomorrow.
and the day after that. This is where the vision has to meet the budget.
Let's just start with this number, 62,000 crore rupees. Wow, that's the price tag on a deal that was just given the green light for 97 new Tejas Mark 1A fighter jets, all built right here in India. This is just a massive vote of confidence in India's own manufacturing power. It's the whole Make in India idea, playing out on a huge stage. It's a really clear message about becoming self-reliant and modernizing the Air Force with our own tech.
But here's where it gets really interesting. When you put that number in context, that huge spend on defense is clearly a top national priority. And this chart, which comes from our source material, really shows you what that looks like. For every single rupee the country spends on its education budget, it spends 8.6 rupees on its defense budget. Now, this isn't a judgment call, okay? It's just a fact that shows the choices being made. Every country has to do this balancing act. How much do you spend on securing your borders right now versus building the mines that are going to secure your future down the road?
Okay, let's shift from national security over to economic development with another big number, 4,515 crore rupees. This is the grand total of 18 different investment projects that just got approved in the state of Odisha. And this isn't just random investment. The focus is on what the source calls future-proof industries. We're talking green energy, advanced manufacturing, data centers, the stuff of tomorrow. And the direct result? They're expecting over 8,200 new jobs. It's a big, strategic bet on where the world economy is going.
And the economic news just keeps coming. Here are two more really important moves. First, a group of ministers is pushing to get rid of the 18% GST tax on health and life insurance. That can make getting that crucial financial protection a lot cheaper and easier for millions of families. And then, over in Andhra Pradesh, the Ratan Tata Innovation Hub has just been launched, and they have a massive goal to create a startup ecosystem just like Silicon Valley. Now, the source is right to point out that this is a noble goal that's going to need a ton of work on policy and infrastructure to pull off, but hey, the first brick has been laid.
You know, building the future isn't just about giant budgets and huge plans. It also happens because of smart, practical, brilliant ideas at every level. We're going to look at two really cool examples now, one from a big institution and one from society itself that show how progress can really come from the ground up. Check this out. The Northeast Frontier Railway is now the very first railway zone in the whole country to test out compostable bioplastic packaging. And where did it come from? From the brilliant students and faculty at IIT Guwahati. This is just a perfect example of a top university working with a massive public service. Just stop and think about the environmental impact if this little pilot program goes national, across the entire Indian railways. It's a small change with the potential for a gigantic positive impact.
And we go from an institution's innovation to a whole society transforming itself. This number it's just incredible, 21 lakh people. That is how many people in Kerala were taught digital literacy, all through a huge campaign run by volunteers. And the result? Today, August 21st, Kerala is set to be officially named India's first fully digitally literate state. And this isn't just about knowing how to use an app on your phone. This is about empowerment. It's about making sure that every single person has the basic tools they need to be a part of the modern world. That is a monumental achievement.
Okay, so we've talked about the rules, and we've talked about the building blocks. Now, let's get a little more philosophical. How does a country actually define itself? What's its story? This next batch of headlines is all about how that national identity gets made through the stories it tells its kids, the values reflected in its laws, and the people it chooses to call its heroes.
Seriously, what is it? Is it about winning wars? Is it about economic power? The wisdom of its judges? The kindness of its people? Or is it, all of the above? Let's take a look at how today's headlines give us a few different answers to that really big question.
You know, one of the most powerful ways you can shape a country's story is by deciding what goes into a kid's textbook. I mean, you are literally writing the first draft of history for a whole new generation. And that is exactly what's happening right now. The NCRT has decided to add lessons about Operation Sindoor, a recent military conflict with Pakistan, into the school syllabus for kids all the way from class 3 to class 12. Putting that in there is a very deliberate choice. It's a signal about what kind of heroism, what version of national identity is being prioritized in the story we tell our kids.
Now, if textbooks are shaping the story for the future, court rulings are shaping the character of right now. And this quote from the Supreme Court is just so powerful. Love is not penal.
They were ruling on the POCO Act, which is the law designed to protect children from sexual offenses, and the court made this incredibly important distinction. The law shouldn't be used to turn genuine, consensual romantic relationships between teenagers into crimes. The court is applying its wisdom to see the nuance to say that teenage romance isn't the same as criminal exploitation. This is a nation defining its legal character, its moral character, with compassion.
And at the end of the day, a nation's story is really just the story of its people. And today, we get to celebrate two very different but equally important parts of India's backbone. First, the nominations are being considered for an award to honor health warriors. These are the unsung heroes, the doctors and nurses providing care in the absolute most remote parts of the country. And then you have the pure grit of a wrestler, Sumit Malik, who just won a silver medal at the U2020 World Championships. You have the quiet dedication of the health worker and the public victory of the athlete. These are the human stories that make up the real character of a nation.
All right, class, time to zoom out. We've been looking deep inside India, at its rules, its big projects, its identity. Now, let's pull the camera back and see how India's story fits into the rest of the world. Because no country is an island, right? What happens out there affects us here, and what happens here can send ripples all across the globe.
So let's quickly touch on two major global hotspots. First, Russia is insisting it gets a seat at the table for any future talks about Ukraine's security. Our source cleverly calls this the foot-in-the-door technique. Get a seat now and you get to influence the main event later. Second, things in the Middle East are getting much more serious. The Israeli military has approved plans for a major offensive to take control of Gaza City and has called up 60,000 reserve soldiers. That is a huge sign that a very large and likely very destructive urban military operation is on the way. These are the kinds of global events that create the background for everything else.
Okay, now for our last story. And I really want you to listen closely to this one because this is where we're going to tie everything together. Over in the United States, President Trump has ordered a review of the famous Smithsonian museums. Why? Well, the claim is that they're focusing too much on what he calls the negative parts of American history, like slavery, and that they should be focusing more on America's brightness. This is a direct, open attempt to manage the national story, to pick and choose which parts of history get highlighted and which parts get swept under the rug.
And boom, there it is, the final connection. Remember a few minutes ago we were talking about India adding Operation Sindoor to its textbooks? Now look at the US president wanting to change what's shown in American museums. It's the same thing. They are two sides of the very same coin. Both are about the power to shape the national narrative. And it brings us right to that universal question that every country on Earth has to deal with. Who gets to write history? The government? The winners? The teachers? It's a question that is never really settled.
Okay, let's bring this all in for a landing. We've been on quite a trip today, haven't we? From the halls of Parliament in New Delhi to global hotspots thousands of miles away. We've peeked into courtrooms, budgets, and classrooms. And here it is, the big takeaway. The news is not just random noise. That bill about jailing ministers, it's connected to the attack on the CM. They're both about power, safety, and who's in charge. That massive 62,000 crore rupees for fighter jets, it's connected to the chart comparing it to the education budget. They're both about a nation's priorities. The new chapters in our school books, they're connected to the museum review in America. They are both about who controls the story. See, every single headline is just a different piece of the same huge, fascinating puzzle.
And so I'm going to leave you with this last little piece of homework. We've shown you some of the threads we saw today. The thread of making rules, the thread of building a nation, the thread of telling a story. But now, it's your turn. Look at the world around you. Think about the headlines we just talked about. What's the one thread that you see connecting it all? Because the real goal here isn't just to dump information on you. It's to get you to start seeing the patterns for yourself.
If you had fun connecting these dots with us today and you want to start your morning by seeing that bigger picture, then please make sure you follow us on Spotify and YouTube. You can catch this explainer every single morning at 8 a.m. We really truly hope that by just bringing you the facts, without any of the bias or the emotional spin, we've helped you form your own clear picture of what's happening. Our ability to do this kind of straightforward, opinion-free news is only possible because of a community of listeners just like you.
We are committed to staying ad-free and totally independent from any corporate or government influence. That way, you know your news is never compromised. If you think that's a valuable thing and you want to support a calmer, clearer way of getting the news, you can find out more on our website. And of course, if you think a friend or a family member would benefit from this, we'd be so grateful if you'd share it with them.
Thank you so much for watching and for joining us on this little journey today. We really hope we've made a positive difference in how you see the news and maybe helps turn some of that daily noise into a story that actually makes sense.
We'll be back with more headlines for you tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. Until then, keep asking questions, keep connecting the dots, and keep smiling and making this world a better place for everyone. Namaskar.